出してきた。というわけで、課題の期間過ぎてるけど、続きは行きましょう。ここをやって、Everyone my first。そして、結構よ、起動して、スタート。うん。ウェブバック、フルウェア。ディスプレイ開いた。で、表示できたので、OK と。これはここまでやって、リターンで。で、この漢字スラッシュ P クラスネーミングと、なら、イシュライス。公約と、こうなるか。なので、ここまで行って、終了と。
We have already seen the use of state in the previous exercise, where we stored the information about the dishes in the menu components state. And we use this information to render the menu
State and
items.
props.
Another way of passing information to a component is through props. Let's discuss a little more detail next. So as we have seen in the previous exercise, each component can store its own local information in its state, quote
ステートっ
unquote.
ていうとこ
So
ろに
this
自分のロー
information
カル
is private
か。
and fully controlled within that component. Now, a state within a component can easily be passed to its children through the use of props, which we will talk about a little bit later. In React, only class components can store state. So if in a particular component you need to store the state, you need to implement that component as a class component. We will see other kinds of React components where we don't need to store state and we can simplify the component declaration significantly. As we have seen in the previous exercise, the state information is usually declared in the constructor of the class component. So when you declare the constructor, you would initialize
スーパープロップスって要する
variable
に相
called
手に
this.state, which
出さ
is
れただ
a
けか。
JavaScript object which contains all the state for this component. If you need to update the state of a component, you cannot directly go and update the state by changing the property values. Instead, any update to a state of a component has to be done through the use of the setState method. So whenever you need to make any changes to the state of a component, you always say this.setState and then supply the property that you want to modify. So when you call the this.setState with a particular property that is changed, then this change will be merged into the state of the component. And again, let me remind you that you should never change the state by doing something like this. You can't say that this state select dish is equal to dish. So never directly manipulate the state property values. When you make use of the child component in your own component, then whatever attributes that you specify to the JSX element will be passed in as props to the child component. So these attributes will be available as props within the child component. And you can easily pass in multiple attributes to the child component. Let's take a look at an example. So in these examples, you can see in the first case, we are using this menu component within your current component, and then you're passing in dishes as one of the attributes there. Now, when you pass this in, then within the menu component, this dishes information that you pass in will be available as this.props.dishes and can be used within the menu component for it to render its view. Similarly, you can pass in multiple attributes if you choose to for a child component, and the child component will get access to each of these multiple attributes as this.props.the attribute name. So as you see, this.props.dish or this.props.comments and so on. So this is an easy way of a parent component passing information to its child component. So in this case, a parent component may be storing the state, and then the state information can be passed to the child component through the use of the props in the form of attributes that you specify to the JSX statements there. Just like the way you handle events in the DOM, you can also handle events similarly in React. But when you specify the events, then you use camel case to specify the events. And when you specify the events, you will pass a function as the event handler in this case. As an example, you can see in this case, we are specifying the on-click event handler in there. Now, within the on-click event handler, I am passing in an arrow function as a parameter there. Now, within this arrow function, as you can see, if you want to pass some information or parameter back to the event handler, that can be easily done as shown in this example. If you don't have any parameter or data to be passed back to the event handler, then you can simply say this.onDishSelect instead of defining it as the arrow function. We will see several uses of such event handlers as we go along in this course. And at that time, I will again remind you about this particular aspect of how you handle events in React. Very often, your React application will be implemented as a hierarchy of components. So in that case, you may wish to lift the state up to an ancestor of the current component. So for example, if several components have a shared state and any change to the state needs to be automatically seen by all these components, then it is better to move the state to one of the ancestors, common ancestor of all these components, and ensure that any state changes will be sent back up to that common ancestor. We will see the use of this in the exercise in one of the later modules. But again, in the very next exercise, you will see me lifting the state up from a child component to its parent component to make it convenient for us to store the state. Any changes to data in one component may need to be reflected to the other component, and this is where by lifting the state up, it makes it more convenient for you to handle this. When you have an array of items, you can easily lay them out as lists in your React components. Lists and the way you handle them is very similar to JavaScript. So for example, if you have an array and you want to iterate over all the items in the array and then convert it into a list, you can easily do that using the map JavaScript function there. So in this example, you can see that I am taking the dishes which come in as an array of JavaScript objects, and then I do the map on that, which gives me access to each element of this array. And then for each element of the array, I can then lay it out as a list item. When you do list items in React, for each of the items, it is important to specify the keys for each element inside an array. So as you can see in this example, I am using an outer div where I specify key is equal to dish ID. So in this case, since each dish will have its own unique ID, I'm using the dish ID as the key when I lay out the list of items there. The reason to specify a key in React is that when there are changes to the number of items in the list, or maybe a new item is added into the list or an item is removed from the list, any such changes to the data may cause re-rendering of the list items. So when React is doing that, it will use these keys to identify which items have been removed, and so appropriately partial re-rendering of this information is facilitated in React. As you recall, React only modifies those parts of the DOM tree that need to be updated. With this quick understanding about the state and props and how you lift the state up and the application of list and keys, let's move on to the next exercise where we will use all these concepts in reorganizing our React application, and then also use a better way of rendering the list of items within our menu in our React application.
まあ、実際に使ってみろってとこだな。Exercise.
Continuing with our exploration of React components in this exercise, we're going to look at how we can pass information to a child component from a parent component using props. And also we'll look at how we can lift the state up to a higher level component. So as you saw in the previous exercise, the menu component was being used by the app component in order to render the list of dishes. So the app component becomes the parent for the menu component. So if there are other components that will share the same state information as the menu component, instead of storing the state information in the menu component, we can lift the state up to the app component and make it available to all other components that are children of the app component through props. So that is what we're going to attempt in this exercise. As a first step in this exercise, I'm going to remove these dishes from this state here and then move it into a separate file so that my code looks more cleaner and better organized. Furthermore, I'm going to lift the state information up to the app component. So to do that, going to the source folder, I'm going to create a new subfolder in there named shared subfolder. Now I'm going to use the shared subfolder to store all the information that is shared among various components in my React application that I'm designing. So in here, I'm going to create a new file named dishes.js file. Now into this dishes.js file, I'm going to paste in all the information about the dishes in the form of an array and then export it from this dishes.js file. So to do that, you can either go to the exercise instructions and then copy the list of dishes information that I've given there and then paste it in here, or alternatively, I have already given you a pre-formatted dishes.js file. You can simply download the dishes.js file and then move it into this shared folder. So here you can see that I have pasted all the dish information into this dishes.js file in the shared folder, and then I'm exporting this constant named dishes from here, which is an array that contains all the details of all the dishes, including additional information. So as you can see, if I simply paste this information into menu component.js, then your menu component file will expand so huge. Instead, it is better to store it in a separate file like this and then export it as a constant from here. We are leveraging JavaScript for making our code organization better. So now I paste this information in here into the dishes.js file. Now what I'm going to do is to go into the app.js file and then lift the state into the app.js file. You will see that in the assignment that follows, we'll realize why it is better to store the state information in the app.js file. So coming into the app.js file, let me first save the changes to the dishes.js file. And then coming into the app.js file, I'm going to import the dishes from shared dishes file here. And then going into the app.js file, note that we need to define the state in here. So to do that, let me add in the constructor. So as you recall, in order to store the state, you need to define the state in the constructor of the class component, and then we'll say super props. This is required, and then we'll define the state here as this state equal to, and a JavaScript object, which is dishes, which is the dishes that I have just imported into my app.js file. So now my state information that contains all the dishes is now lifted into the app.js file. And I can make this available to the menu component through props from the app.js file. So once I have lifted this into the app.js file, let me go down here and then make this dishes available as props to the menu component. So I'll say dishes equal to this state dishes.
こでプロ
So this
プロ
way,
プ
the
か。
dishes that I have defined in the state for my app component is now made available as props to my menu component. So I can go into my menu component and this dishes information becomes available
メニュー
into
にプロ
my
プロ
menu
パティと
component.
して、
Now let me save the changes to the app.js
dishes
file. Now
その
going
メニュ
into
ーが
the
いっぱいあ
menu
る。
component, I no longer need the dishes in the state of the menu component because I am receiving that as
これはすで
props
に入ってるか
from
ら、
my parent, which is the app component. So I'm going to clear out the state there. So the code is a lot more cleaner now. Now, in order to make this available for us to use within my menu component, notice that the props are already available for me here. So in here, when I construct the menu item here, so I'm constructing the menu item here. Now, when I construct the menu here, instead of saying this state dishes, I need to change that to this props dishes. And then that's it. My menu component will work just as before. So let me save the changes to the menu component and let's go and take a look at our application in the browser. Going to the application in the browser, I can see that my application looks exactly the same as before, no changes. I have simply replaced the use of the state in the menu component by use of the props in the menu component, and everything works just as before. Now, I'm going to go into the menu component and then render this dish information in a different way using cards. So if you have done the Bootstrap course, you know what cards look like. So we're going to use a card component from React Strap and then lay out the menu items in a different way to make it look a bit more elegant. Going back to my menu component, instead of the media object, I'm going to use a card from React Strap. So I'll import card and then card image because I'm going to display an image there. And then I'll also import card image overlay. You will see how I make use of that in a short while. And then card text and card body and card title. All these components I am importing from React Strap, and then I'm going to make use of them to render my dish information in a different way. So now that I have imported all these, let's go ahead and then fix up the way we lay out each dish in here. So instead of using the media, I'm going to change that to a card. So I'm going to make use of the card component to do the layout of this. And then for the div that encloses this here, I'm going to say div call 12, call MD5, change this to M1, so meaning 1 unit margin all around in here. So by doing this, what I am doing to this div is for the extra small to small screen sizes, I'm going to lay out one card below the other in the row. For medium to extra large screens, I'm going to lay out cards side by side, each card occupying 5 columns in my row, in my Bootstrap row there. So that's the change that I've made here. So for the card, now the image no longer, we don't have the media anymore. So instead of the media object, here I am going to use the card image to render the image there, card image. And then for this card image, I will give the width as 100%. And the source remains as dish.image, and the alternative is also dish.name. So thus that part remains exactly the same as before. And then this one, I'm going to change this to card image overlay here, and this part also to card image overlay. So the media object that I was using, I have changed that to card image overlay here. And then this media heading, I'm going to change that to card title. And I am not going to show the description in the menu here, so I'm going to remove the description from there. After these changes, let me now go down to the bottom here, and then in here I'm going to remove this media list here because I am no longer using the media object here. So I'm going to remove that, and I'm simply going to render the menu into this row here, and the menu items are already being formatted into different columns of the row by using this div here. So let's save the changes and go and take a look at the resulting application in the browser. Going to the browser, you see now how my menu items are laid out on the screen there. So as you can see, instead of displaying a list of items, I am now showing images of each of the items and then the name of each of these items right there. Of course, the details of each of these menu items is now removed from this list, but this is how this is displayed in a medium to extra large screen size. If I want to see the same view in extra small to small screen size, we can go to the view and developer tools, and then I'm going to click on this and then see the view on a, as you can see the responsive view here. So on a Pixel 2, what this view looks like on a Pixel 2 device. So you can see the nav bar there and then the items being laid out one below the other because we have used col 12 there. So this is laid out one below the other in the view here. So that is the layout that we have just created by using the cart for my menu items. So not only that, now the next thing that I'm going to do is if I click on any one of these, I want to show the details of the particular dish down below here. And I'm going to use again the card in order to display the details of the dish. So now I need a way of responding to clicks on these. So this is where we're going to use the on-click to respond to clicks of these items in the menu. So going back to my menu component, in the state for my menu component, I'm going to introduce a new property called as selected dish, which I will assign as null initially. So the selected dish is null initially, so which means that I haven't selected any dish. Now, whenever I click on any one of these dishes, then I will make the dish information become equal to the selected dish. So to do that, let me go into the card here, and then for this card, I am going to introduce the on-click method here. So when this is clicked, so this is how you respond to the handling of the events that are caused on your view there. So inside this on-click, so whenever this on-click is clicked, I'm going to call this function, which I'm going to implement in a short while, called this on dish select, and then I will pass the dish information as the parameter to that. So now you see how we can respond to the event that is caused in my view there. So when I click on the card, that card information is passed into this method called on dish select. Now what do I do in this on dish select method? So I need to implement this on dish select here. So let's go in here and say on dish select, and this receives the dish as the parameter. So when it receives the dish as the parameter, now I want to update the selected dish to point to this dish which is received as the parameter here. So to do that, remember that when we need to change the state, we need to use the this set state function call. You can't directly say selected dish is equal to dish. Instead, we have to say this set state, and then inside here we'll say selected dish. And this will result in, whenever this function is called, then this set state will ensure that this selected dish will be set equal to the dish which is received as a parameter here. So at that point, the selected dish will be set to the dish on which we just clicked on the user interface. So that's how you change the state of your component here. So we are setting the selected dish. Now, when the dish is selected, I want to also render the details of the dish. So I'm going to add in one more method here called render dish, which will be supplied the dish as the parameter here. And then so inside this render dish method, inside this render dish method, I will first check if dish not equal to null. So obviously if the dish is not null, only then I will render the dish. Otherwise, I will simply return a div, an empty div here.
消すんだ。
So if you return an empty div, nothing will be rendered on the screen. So when the selected dish is null, I will return this empty div and nothing will be rendered on the screen. If the selected dish is not null, then at that point we will render the dish here. So in here we'll say return. Now here I'm going to use the card that we have just designed there, the card component. I'll use the card component in a different way to render my dish there. So inside this card component, we'll render the dish in this way. Let me copy the card image. We're going to use the same approach for the card image. So I'm going to display the card image at the top, and then down below the card image, I'm going to display the card body. And in the card body, I'm going to display the
description.
Card title. So let me copy this card title from here. So in this card body, I'm going to display the card title. And also, I will display the card text as dish description. So card text. So this is how I construct the card for the selected dish when I render it on the screen there using the card. So now you see how the render dish is returning the card there. So how do I make use of the render dish here? So going down into my code here, right below this, I'm going to define another row here.
Sunny.
And inside this row div, I'm going to display the card. So to do that, I'll say this render dish and supply this state dot selected dish as the parameter to the render dish function. So when this render dish function is called, that will return the selected dish in the form of a card, and that will be displayed down below here. So with these changes, let me save all the changes, and then let's go and take a look at our application in the browser. Going to my application in the browser. Now, when I click on any dish, so let's say we click on the second dish here, and you will see immediately that the second dish is rendered down below here with the details of the dish as shown here. So as you can see, the details of the dish. So if I click on a different dish, then immediately that dish information is rendered down below here, and so on. With this, we complete this exercise. In this exercise, we have seen several things. We have seen how we can lift the state up to a higher level component and then pass the state information down to the child component using props. We also saw how we can respond to events that are caused on the UI. In this case, the on-click event on any card in the UI, and how we render the details of the dish using the card component from React Stamp. With this, we complete this exercise. This is a good time for you to do a git commit with the message components part 2.
というわけで、Exercise Instructions React Component Part 2 Objectives and Outcomes. In this exercise, we will continue modifying the menu component from the previous exercise. In this overlist, we will use the card component from React Stamp to display the menu a different way. Also, we will use the card component to display details of displays. At the end of this exercise, you will make use of the card component to display this card. Use the card component to display this. まずは Dishes。これをダウンロードする。これやっといて、名前をつけてリンクを保存。Education。あれ ここでこうして、名前をつけて保存。そして、ワークスペース、エデュケーション。ダウンロードしたいというところに、コンスタントできるから、ここでコード。オーセラのリアクトに SRC にシェアードを作り、実 JS を入れる。一応機能しとこう。そうすると、まずはインデックス JS じゃない。アップ JS。ここに、インポート。今のやつで合わせてやるんだから、カードはとにかく後だ。順番に行きましょう。コンスタ This is。これを読み込むには、import This is。大文字で入れ。うん。import This is from10スラッシュシェアード。スラッシュ This is。そうすると、おかしいな。アプリのか。プラスアップエクステンドコンポーネントがここじゃなくて、アップ JS だな。アップ JS。メインルーチンアップ JS ファンクション。いけない、いけない、いけない、いけない。プラスメニューコンポーネント。コンストラクトオンデーシこれメニューの方、コンポーネント。で、アットネームシェアドフォルダー、スレスフォルダーです。で、これを実施 JS で入れて作っ で、オープンアップです。アップ自体がファンクションになってるけど、そうじゃなくて、プラス、アップ、エクステンズ、コンポーネンツ。そして、っていう、レンダー。こうか。リターンの、これで、とりあえず表示は変わらない。OK。そして、ユーザーコンポーネンツ。まず、コンスト。これモデルで作ってるとそういうになるんだな、本来は。こうと、こういう風にやっといて、うん、うん、です。スラッシュ、ペアードスラッシュ、ディッシス。そして、どれだプロップス。プロップスを上から引っかかるから、スーパスーパーで前の親クラスに引き継いで、this then state んで、this is を入れるから、state イコールになるのね。this state イコール this is で、これにさっき言った this is が入る。そしてメニューには引き渡して、メニュー、this is all this then, えっと、then, this is なるわけね。で、そうしよう。そうするとメニューが。メニューコンポーネント。まずここが消える。 そして、スーパープロップスの、あそこに入ってるわけだから、メニューの方はプロップスに控えてあるから、プロップスになる。ここステートの方が現になる。親だからプロップスで変えられる。コンディかな。行かない。こういう時は一つ一つ戻していくのが基本だから、My first API this non-numeric set up.js レンダーか。ここをとりあえずアウト。で、ここも一回外して、これで行く。し、インポート。This is from and shared. This is これでは大丈夫。そして、ナブワーディブここにメニュー。表示はされなくてもいいんだよな。ここでメニューは消える。ということはメニューがおかしい。メニューは、で、this is イコール、イコール、this state, then this is こうなるはず。そして、メニューコンポーネント。JS が欲しいかな、もしかして。ちょっと見てみよう。This is JS。スポーツこの This is イコール。ちゃんとこれは、This is イコール。S4 かよ。そうだよね。じゃあ、 app.js、とりあえずメニュー。どうだ？ダメ。じゃあ、メニュー JS。でもここで、this is コロン、this is。これメニューここに必要ないんだよな。だけどこうやると、ここでステートでできるはず。エラー、if の点のアンデブ。ならば、インポート、this is、this is、then slash there、this is。じゃあ、ここ点々ってすればできるかな。これで一応読める。じゃあ、ここをプロップにすると、言える。と、まずステート、ここを外して、インポートもう一つ消すでしょ？コンストメニューイコール一回、コンストメニューイコール、こうやって、EU リターン、スラッシュ、この E、this、プロプス、this、こうやれば、あれ 向け出して、スラッシュ、リーブ、クラスネーム。this ops is これ、まあ表示はされないけど、ということで次に、インポート。これプロプティスが表示されてないってことは、引き出されてないということだから、スーパープロップして、ディステンステートイコール、イコール、ここに this is from this is menu this is all this state and this is と。もうでいいかな。これ切れた。いや、メニューじゃなくて、スラッシュ、スラッシュ P。うん。これでどうだ。そうするとこれエラー出てる。This is の This is。やっぱし This is がエラーだな。いや、でもあの時戻っていた。ここはうん。This is。うん。わかんない。レンダーでここにする前にコンソールしよう。コンソールログの this state this is これで入ってれば、あれが入ってる。まあ一応できてるってことだな。ならこっちも。コンソールログの引き出しが入ってるならば、これでシールの引き出しができるかどうかチェックしなきゃいけないかな。コール、this, date, then, this, と。これでエラーが出る。 7番目。多分ここがエラー出るんだから、これコンソール、ログ、カッコ、プロプス、コンマ、ディス、プロプス、ディシス。入ってない。ということは、コンセプトスーパープロップディスってだから入ってるはずなんだけどな。これで一回閉じて、こう消して、もう一回やってみよう。見えないのは出るからだから、これはうちに。
主はどの言語が得意なんですか？
前は PHP をやってますけど、特に得意っていうのはないですかね。今は JavaScript をやってて、プロップスで入ってる。ということは、ここは来てるんだ。ということは、ここまでは大丈夫なはず。んうん。なんかおかしいか。いいのかな。いや、ちゃんとしよう。こうやってメニュー作成の部分。そうすると、メニュー作成はもう聞かないの。もうちょっとおかしいんだけどな。this state が this props で、return, div, media で、メディアメディアオブジェクトで画像を見せて、レフト見てるおしまいです。横に、メディアヘディング、スラッシュメディアの、スラッシュディブで、一旦、この、ここまでで、うーん、グリッター入ってんのにな。アローパターンズ always。仕方ない。とりあえず手動でできるものをやっておこう。これで、Web ばっかコンパイルして、出ない。実はボベローカードする。 download the labels related to devices. Uncodable this blocks map is not a function. This props map. this props map じゃなかったかな。連打実写のオンリーセックスのスター。マップ、カッコディッシュ。これが関数じゃないってどういうことよ。This props map. This props. This is マップこうか。いた。これで、とりあえず、メディアの問題があるけど、抜けがあるけど、表示はもう切った。次。このメディアの代わりに、コンポーネントとするカードを入れる。おーっと。カード。カード。カード。イメージ。カードイメージ。カードイメージ。オーバーレイ。カードタイトル。カードボディ。カードテキスト。from リアクトストラップ。っていうのはできないのかな。そうすると、ここが、イコール12、MD は5。ここがもう一回もコピーする。リターンカード。じゃない。div クラスネームイコール。これ、カラムが MD5 か。カラムが MD は5で、M は1と。そして、ここが変わって、メディアをタグかけて、これがカードイメージになる。カードイメージ。src イコールでしか、あるとイコールですね。で、which イコール 100%。で、div の代わりに、ここがカードになって、 違う。ここのリブは、I で、このリブの中にカードを作る。キーコール。ID。そうすると、このメディアが抜けて、こうなって、メディアヘディングのところが、カードイメージオーバーレイかなで、カードイメージオーバーレイ。つまり、カードの上にここが、これだけでもやると、エラー出た。でしてあれで、閉じてないっていう。レイアウトストラップはダメ。なのに、ここがこれでやれと。これで画像が出る。だからそれでダメだから、スラッシュ、カード、オーバーレイのカードタイトル。T してんね。でここのメディアリストがいるから、このメニューを作ると。おぉ、別に表示できた。そうするとメニューは使わない。メディアは使わない。この時点で一回 Git で、うん。うん。どっちなら Git MV My First Exam は、ですとこう。Yes。当然、ここで失敗するのは、これが全部その名前に入ってるからだし、こっちでコントロール C でエキスしてないからだよ。もう一回。この一回閉じて。Do I try again? Yes. これも閉じ。あと残ってるのは、よし、OK。そうすると、アップチェイス、ギットし。 メニュー表。スタイル。CD。WT、10、ジルダ。ダメか。よいしょ。ワークスペース。コーセラの HKU のエルズ。CD、ウィークゼロイズのエグザム。ここで PM スタートとすれば、今のところが表示されるはず。えー、うんうん。まあ、ここがこうなっちゃうのは仕方ない。スタートビルドリアクトスクビルド。何が起きてるって、モジュールドットファン。セーブバー、セーブのリアクト、リじゃあ一回、荒領事をしよう。ここが、戻せることも戻せるんだしね。ノードモジュールス PNP。クレジットアップ全部入ってるじゃん。オーセラ。ここを全部消しちゃいまして、モジュールはなくても PNP も残ってるからね。またインストールはできるはず。ゴミ箱は空にしておいて、で、こっちで、デブはデブ、ストラップを、 4.6.1 か。で、リアクト。リアクトバーストラップ。これでいいかな。いやー、抜けてるような気もするけど。ということは、こっちで PNPM スタートとすれば、もう一回読み込むようにして、できた。じゃあ次。コードを起動。ビジュアルコードを起動。SRC のコンポーネンツのメニューコンポーネンツ。is ステートに、select it dish すると。で、メイン、そして、こう、ディッシュ。オン、レン、カレンダー、ディッシュ。つまり、この下に表示させるレンダーは、ディッシュでいく。if ディッシュ。ここはイコールイコールなわけで、まあ、大きに単の方がわかりやすいよねっていう気がする。リターン、カッコ、なんもないよと。セミコン。そうじゃなければ、フラッシュ、リブ、クラス。簡単にカードだけ遊びできるか。スラッシュカード。スラッシュじゃない。カードでカードイメージ。ウィッツイコール。ああ。これは100%。ここは、今度大きくするから50に即、40%ぐらいですか。40%。SRC イコール 実主点イメージ。あるとイコール。実主点ね。こっちだと、カードボディを使うんだね、やっぱし。トップになるんだ。ボディ。カードボディはそのままでいいのかな。この文字をコピーしよう。カードタイトル、ディッシュ。カードテキスト。実施点イメージのスラッシュ P クラスネーム、アライン、これでいいことはずだ。だら、いや、いいんだよ。だらだな、やっぱし。い、ヒュ、ドット、プライス。あれこれいいのかな。スラッシュ。ああ、セミコロンいらない。ここせめてコンマの方がいい。で、えーっと、イベントハンドラー。オンカードクリック。オンディスクでいいか。まあ、オンディッシュセレクトか。オンディッシュセレクト。セレクト。あ、この場合ディッシュって言われるわけだから、this set state。this 点、set state。 this selected 種が実になるやとなっておしまい。そして、レンダラーに、ここにレンダー実です。人の心に、うん。メインレンダーのここ。もう一つ。メニュー以外のクラス。ここは、ブートストラップだからこうなるってことだな。リブ。クラスイコール。クラスネームなんだな、やっぱり。ネームコール10。コールの MD 箱。なんでもいいんだけど、まあ5でしょ。モバイル。隣実践レンダーレンダーディステンステート。セレクティッドディッシュ。こうか。あ、これは分ける必要はないんだ。このままですね。呼び出せばいい。これでここまでやって、できるようになる。で、オンクリックのイベントを出してないから、カードのラスト、オンクリックイベントを、どこだオンディッシュセレクトイベントを作んなきゃいけない。カードキーイコールオンディッシュ。ここのカードに、オンクリックイコール、この中に、かっこ矢印。アローでオン、セレクトのディッシュか。これで、メニューレンダーディストッピーこれも40になってるところを、例えば、なんで こういう風にやると 100%。こういう風にしたらいい。ここまでできる。ちょっとおかしいかな。レンダーディッシュの、この P、例だな。まあ、これを見ればいいだけだから、テキストバレーとか、つまり、ここを、こうしとけば、これを選ぶと、右寄せで 1.11 と出てくると。で、これは、MD でこう出ると。OK。じゃあ、git st。コミット。できるだろう。選択時に、詳細、表示するのを追加と。さあ、じゃあ。ということで、コミットしたところで、これは関係ない。ここまで行って、終了と。さあ、次だ。
We have just completed learning about a React component. We have seen how we can create a React component by defining a class and subclassing the React component class.
クラスから継承で。
In the next module, we'll learn about other kinds of React components. But for a class component in a React application, every class component has a life cycle associated with it. What exactly is the life cycle? Let's briefly talk about that. As we realize, a React application is made up of multiple React components that are connected together to form the entire screen of your React application's view. Now, each React component, as and when it is required, will be created by React and then added into the DOM of your entire application. So every time a React component needs to be included into your application's view, then the component that hosts the specific part of the view will be created and added into the overall React component hierarchy. Now, so a component passes through what we call as the life cycle for the component. Now, initially the component doesn't exist. Then the component gets created, and then once it is created, then it can be mounted into your React application at an appropriate point in the hierarchy of components. Then it will exist at that point for a period of time, and then subsequently maybe you no longer require that view.
ありがとうございます。まあ見ての通り、コーセラというアメリカの英語の授業をやってます。引退しちゃったんですけど、まあその前は4、5年やってましたね。
Now, in every stage of this life cycle, React provides
打つさえ出なければ多分現役だったと思います。
methods that can be invoked to perform certain operations. So again, to summarize what I just discussed, a React component goes through the following life cycle stages.
なんとかリーダーまで上がったぐらいですかね。マネジメント、そうです。修士まで来ました。得意なのはやってたのは PHP ですけど、あとは Java とかぐらいですかね。今は JavaScript をやっているところです。ある程度。で、これは英語読めるんで、それでは楽ですね。はい。そうですね。資格は基本情報しか持ってないですね。あとは、基本情報処理を持ってました。は1回ですね。会社に入った時の初年に受けて受かったので、その時だけですね。2000年だから、そんなことはないと思います。ちゃんと基本さえやれば出てくると思います。600万は超えなかったと思います。550万ぐらいだったかな。そこまで優秀じゃなかったので。今50超えてます。自分よりはこういった授業をやった方がいいと思います。仕事はしてないです。鬱になってリタイアしたままですね。障害者年金をもらってます。まあ、リハビリみたいなもんですね。それはひどすぎる。転職した方がいいと思います。2級です。障害年金2級ですね。だから自宅にこもってます。うつで、10年くらいいるとなるからね。あと、発達障害らしいって話は聞いてるけど、まだ決まってないんで、それはわかんないです。うつで家で出れなくなっちゃうと、さすがにって感じですね。
So the constructor will be invoked when the menu component is created. So to illustrate to you that indeed this is going to be called, I will put a simple console log statement in there saying menu components constructor is invoked. So that way you can see in the console log that this indeed was called. Now, similarly,
そうです。JavaScript、リアクトの JavaScript のリアクトですね。今は JSX のところと、これからモジュールを作るところですかね。コンソールログで、
method here, new lifecycle method here called component did mount, and this method will be invoked again. We'll
mount っていうのをやるので、
so we'll say component did mount, and then I'll do a console log saying menu component did mount is invoked. Now, I will add this in here just to illustrate to you that these lifecycle methods are indeed being called as the component is getting mounted. So in this example, we see that when our React application gets created, the app.js will mount the menu component into its view. And so at that point, the
menu 完全に組み込み系はやったことないですね。C が多いって聞いたんですけど。
So let's execute this and then watch the console, JavaScript console in our browser to see when these methods are getting invoked. Going to our browser, you see that our application has been rendered just like before. There is no change to the view of our application. But let me open the JavaScript console. So here, I'm going to the view developer JavaScript console. If you're using another browser, then you would similarly be able to access the JavaScript console in the browser using a similar approach. Look for the developer tools which are part of your specific browser that you are using. So again, going into the JavaScript console, you can see here the first statement. It says menu component constructor is invoked. Then the next thing that is printed in the console says menu component render is invoked, and then finally menu component did mount is invoked. So you see how these three methods are invoked in that sequence as your component gets mounted into your DOM by your React application. So these methods will allow you to get access to the component at various stages of its creation and mounting into the DOM. And if you need to perform any operation during that period, you can include the appropriate code into the specific location, either in the constructor or in the render or in the component did mount methods. Now we have already seen that in the constructor we are initializing the constructor. So that is one use of the lifecycle method. Similarly, if we want to do something after the component is mounted into the DOM, then we can include that in the component did mount method. Now we will see the use of that in one of the later exercises in the last module of this course. As we are working on our React application, let me also draw your attention to a developer tool that is available for React called as React DevTools, which is
Facebook だからそういうのが入ってるよねって話か。
This is an extension that gets added to your browsers, either Chrome or Firefox, or even available as a standalone app if you would prefer to use it. Now, in my case, since I am using the Chrome browser, I'm going to install the Chrome browser extension and then make use of it within my application. So this is an interesting tool that will be very useful as you're developing your React application, because you can easily when your React application gets created and rendered, then you can see various aspects of your React application, including the DOM hierarchy, which will enable you to check for any errors. So if you encounter any problems in the way the views are rendered, then you can go and check in the React developer tools. Let me show you the React dev tools for the specific application that we have been working on. Now, before we do that, if you want to add the developer tools, go to the appropriate browser extension there and then add it into your browser. So for Chrome, you go to the Chrome Dev Store and then from there add the extension for Chrome. Similarly for Firefox, if you want to use a standalone app, then you can download that and then make use of it. Now, I find that it is a lot more easy for me to integrate the extension into my Chrome because I'm already using the console log for watching the JavaScript console. And so the React DevTools will add one more tab to that developer tools window that I bring up at the bottom of my browser. And so it is more convenient for me to use the React DevTools that way. Now, a link to the React DevTools is available in the additional resources of this section. Now, going to my React application. Now, in my React application, right there in the developer tools, I have the React DevTools installed there. So when you open it, you can see the structure of your DOM there. So you can see the app here. Now, the advantage of doing this is that you can go in and watch all the properties that are being sent to each one of these components. And also, for example, in the menu, you can go into the menu and then see the props that have come to the menu, so you can easily find out whether your props are being correctly passed into the menu item or not, and so on. And then when you click on a particular dish, as you realize, you're going to be rendering that particular dish there. So the details of the dish are shown down below here. And you would also see in the React developer tools, you can see the state here, and you can see that the selected dish is initialized to the dish that we just selected. So that's the advantage of React DevTools. It will allow you to go in and see the different aspects, the different parts of your application, and be able to check to see if you are encountering any errors, if the props are being correctly passed, if the state is correctly initialized. All these can be easily useful while you are developing your React application. So take advantage of the React DevTools to help you track as you develop your React application.
なるほど。リアクトを作るなら、これを使えと。こっちじゃない、こっちの、ツール、アド、リアクト。リアクトデベロッパーツール。それから、 予約とコネクティブツール。まあ、これでいいでしょう。ブートストラップは何か使えますよと。予約とでも予約トラップカード。こういうのを今回やります。で、終了でいいや。Facebook。ページノットファンドかよ。ここのコンポーネンツ。ここに今入れましたと。でも、オフじゃないよ。字幕に英語を入れて、再生。
It is time for the very first assignment in this course. In this module, we had explored React, how we can create React components, the state and props of a component, and also lists and keys for when we display a list of items in our components. So in this exercise, we will use all these concepts. Now, in the previous exercise, we had shown the details of a chosen dish at the bottom in the menu component itself. In this assignment, you're going to separate that into its own component called as the dish detail component. So the details of the dish will be rendered through the dish detail component, which you will import into the menu component and pass in the information about the selected dish to the dish detail component in the form of props from the menu component. So that gives you the rough idea of what we would like to display. In addition, we will also show a list of comments about the specific dish in the dish detail component when we display the details of the chosen dish. Let's look at the 3 tasks in this assignment in a bit more detail. Coming to our application, in the first task of your assignment, you will be taking the details of the selected dish that we showed at the bottom and instead move that into its own component called as the dish detail component. Details of what you need to do are given in the assignment write-up. So when you click on any dish, then that details of the dish will be displayed at the bottom here using the dish detail component. Now, within the dish detail component, as you can see, the details of the dish are shown through one single card here. This card occupies 5 columns when you are on a medium to extra large screen size. So you notice that this is aligning very well with each of the items in my menu here. Now, in addition to this, so that will be your first task, separating this out into its own component. The second task is to show the details of the specific dish here using the card component. We have already seen the use of the card component for showing the details of the specific dish in the previous exercise. So you need to reorganize the code into the dish detail component so that this card is shown in the dish detail component. In addition, we are also supplying you with a list of comments that you need to display in the form of a list here. So as you can see, each comment is shown whereby the details of the comment are shown and the author of the comment is shown here, and then the date is shown as such as a string as given in the comments object that is included in each dish. So look at the details of the comments that are included in each dish to get an idea of where you can get the comment, the author of the comment, and the date for that particular comment. So this is how you will be displaying each of the comments in your
module としては、これのお皿メニューについて理解しろと。
Display this information on a medium to extra large screen size. Now, when you switch to a extra small or a small screen size, so as you can see here, this is a Pixel 2 in portrait mode. So here you see that all the dishes are stacked, but the chosen dish is going to be shown below the list of dishes here, and then the comments are shown in its own column below the selected dish here as shown in this picture here. So these are the 3 tasks that you need to complete in this assignment. First task, to move the display of the selected dish into its own component. Second, to show the details of the dish using a card component. And third, to show the list of comments about the selected dish as shown here. Have fun completing the first assignment of this course.
トイレ行ってきました。続き行きましょう。期限切れですけどね。18日なので。1週間も切れてる。今のは、in the assignment, you will add a new component of the React application to follow the selected dish. You will use card component and the bootstrap and style list component to prepare the view of this new component. で、ここでさっきにビデオとコンポーネントを作ろうと。Step by step assignment instructions. Object and outcomes. In this assignment, you will continue to work with the React application that you have been developed in the exercise. You will add a new component named Dish Detail Component that displays the details of a selected dish. You will then design the view of the component using the card component at the end of this assignment. You should have completed these following tasks. Create a new Dish Detail Component and add to your React application. You update the view of the dish component to display the details of the selected dish using an historical component. Update the view of the details component to display the list of components about this using the bootstrap and style list component. Alignment requires this assignment requires you to complete the following tasks. Detailed instructions for each task are given below. The pictures of the computer page included below indicates the location within the page that in this you will adding a dish details component. To hear the application and include the component into the menu component views. What the details of specific dish are compared here. In place showing the dish in menu components of dish detail component で切り替える。Make sure the pass is props で、ディッシュディテールの方にプロップというのを用いてお聞き出すと。Create dish detail class in file name dish detail component is in the component folder. ここにディッシュディテールコンポーネントを作り、ディッシュディテールクラスを作る。ディッシュディテールクラス from this file so that can be imported many content and used to select レンダーファンクションを切り、purpose in the unique class will make this significance and Google and also apply a class of M-sensitive. This comment should be includes a DVD Apple class. まずは、ここに新しいファイル、ディテール、コンポーネント、ディステールコンポーネントです。インポート、ここはもう決まってるから、その前は、リアクトで読み込むと。 カードまで一緒だな。じゃあ、ここまでコピーしよう。実習、ディテール。メニューの詳細を表示すると。クラス、実習、ディテール、エクステンス。エクステンス系好きじゃないけど、まあ、コンポーネントと。まではいいよ。で、コンストラクター。これはもう、コンストラクター、カッコでプロプス。スーパープロプスと。コンテナの中作ればいいんだから、そっか。で、レンダー。レンダー、カッコ。メインレンダーですね。こうなって。プロプス自体が入るんだから、マティユリターン。もう、こう、やってることは変わったんだな。ここで見るのはディスプロプスをスケールだけ。あるいは、コンスト、コースディッシュイコール、ディスプロプス。こうかな。そうするリターン、リーブ、クラスネームイコールロー。レンダーでしたけど、来たような気もするが、まあ、一緒か。で、ディブか。いや、待って。これメニューコンポーネントがどこなってたかを見た方がいい。じゃない。レンダーの、で、次にクラスネームで、カラマ作るんだ。リーブ、クラスネーム。全体の次。で、MD、この M は1。分けることになるのかな。分けることになるような気もするが。で、この場合、今ディッシュが入れたから、メニューの、レンダーディッシュ、カード以下はディッシュになってるから、これをこっちに持ってくる。でもディスプロプスがディッシュにしてるから、そのまま使えるってことね。で、カードイメージ、カードボディ、カードタイトル、カードテキストは、E とストライトで表画面。 カード、アートと。カードボディ。カードボディがある。ここはもう一つ下になる。で、カード。で、ディーブ。これおしまい。で、this was this じゃなくていいから、ここに、ユーザーコンポーネントが入る。インポート、ディッシュ、ディテール。で、from、n、フラッシュ、ディッシュディテールコンポーネント。そうすると、ディッシュディテールコンポーネントは、レンダーディッシュの部分が、div クラスイコールかが、ディッシュディテール、ディッシュ、コール、ディス、テンステート、セキュリティディッシュとなる。こうか。これで、ディッシュディテールがクラスローで表示されれば、そっか。ない時の表示は入れた方がいいのか。そうすると、ディッシュディテールコンポーネントが入ってない。うん。ここ、10、フラッシュ、ディテールコンポーネント。これで、そうか、エクスポートディテールもできてなきゃいけないんだ。実質で作ったものは、エクスポート、デフォルト、ディッシュ、ディテールかな。エクスポートディッシュディテール、インポーティッドアズディッシュディテール、ディッシュディテールコンポーネント。今入れたはずだぞ。それは、そのソースを見て、エクスポートデフォルトディッシュ。if、カッコ、ディッシュ、イコール、ヌルは、無理や。IDU、リターン、カッフラッシュ。これでよし。どこでエラー出た？ 163で読んで。ここまでいってる。だから、スラッシュ、ディッシュディテール。だって、インポート、ディッシュディテールのディッシュディテールコンポーネント。JS? こうなって、インポートプレスが入って、このスペプス。これ、エクスポートデフォルトアップ。です。関係ない。ディッシュディテールコンポーネント。入ってない。ローカルホスト。163年。インポート DC で was not found in DC でコンポーネント。インポートでんデフォルト DC ディテール。次、メニューコンポーネント。ここで、インポート、インテグラル、ディッシュディテール。アップロン、シングルクォートの10、フラッシュ、ディッシュディテールコンポーネント。なんでならば、点々、フラッシュ、コンポーネント。モジュールなんとしてます。コンポーネント。そうするとコンポーネントはこれで OK。export HTTP と HTTP は not one to one component possible export and export。メニューで入ってって、エクスポートメニューだから最後に入ってればいいんでしょ うーん。ここは、これで検索しよう。デフォルトも入れなくていい？デフォルトのかしてみるか。お、モチベートフィールドになった。エクスポート。でもこういうふうに探せばいい。リアクト、コンポーネント、エクスポート。コーナー、これを見ればいい。聞いたっていいかどうかわかんないけど、まあ、わかりゃいいよね、ある程度。エクスポートデフォルト、全然書いてね。こう、エクスポートフィールドになってこれないとか。まあ、エクスポートデフォルトとして、こういう風にできるのか。あるいはエクスポート、こういう風にやる。あ、できた。いや、待って、じゃあもう一つもやってみよう。一応確認。 デフォルトだとダメか。デフォルト、エクスポートしなきゃいけない。意外とこんなところで目光るな。クラスだからディッシュディテールをやるよと。して、うん。選んだらセレクトと、見てみたい。コンソール。うん。して、ー。レンダーディッシュはまず外す。で、ディッシュディテール。ディッシュ、コール、ディステン、点、セレクティッドディッシュとする。これでどうかな。一応できた。うん。次。それ前に一回コンスしよう。コミットして、あとの、オーセラ、リアクト。はい。表示用に、ディッシュ、ディテール、コンポーネントを、で、追加したので、次に行きましょう。In this study, you will be adding a card component. This is the component built to display the level. え、インポートファンクションネームレンダーディッシュを入れろ。もしかして、ディッシュディテールコンポーネントに、 選択肢だ。そうすると、使う分断するから、メソッドレンダー実施を実装する。もう一緒。そうじゃなければ、ここの部分を、ここに、多分、this, then, レンダーディッシュ、this, フラップス、then ディッシュとやってみれば、これで表示はできるかなと。OK。This is you will use comment into this episode of display this. レンダーコメントを作る。表示も同じように、やって、レンダーコメント。うん、ここディッシュにしよう。で、 どうしようかな。裏を返してもいいか、別に。長期リターンすると考えるだけ。あとは、0.5文字手間。うーん。うーん。ゴール。1点。これは、シェアードのディシテン JS のここだな。コメントマップ、カッコ、カッコ、コメント、アローファンクションとして、セミコロン。リターン、カッコ。この JSX は、とりあえず、何、コメント10、レーティング、フラッシュ、フラッシュ、インテグラル、10、コメント。これ後でリストにすればいいだけだから、コメント10、オーサー。こんな感じで入れときいいだけか。ああ、腕が出た。カッコのスペックの抜けているとこだ。ここのリターンは必要ない。で、リターン、このセミコロンのインタグラルのメンツというのか。そうすると、次。これを表示する。同じようにやっといて、this、これイコール、システム、レンダ コメンツのエラーが出た。This is within the issue. コメンツ、コロン。コメンツ。これで、なんか、どこでプレゼントそうですね。コンポーネンツ。プロファイラー。This diffuse turn is not function. うん。あ、待ってみよう。この、メニューコンポーネントの括弧が一緒なんだよな。コメンターにつこう。こういうのは、あ、EC はコメントだけにすれば。最低限の実装をするっていうのが基本だね。リターンのまんまだし。フラッシュ、リブ。これで、関数。 現実っていうかもですけどね。一回閉じて、こっちでうまくいってるから、来ちゃった。アプリケーション。これで、リアクトが動いて、出ないよっていうのは分かってる。チェックと連打メソッドメニュー CH クリアが出される。ダメか、これは。さすがに、なるほどね。この中が、プロパティでやるから、そこまでは言ってる。だからコメントの部分が失敗してるんだ。こういこう。とりあえずプロパティで手話を切ってるはず。となると、コメントの部分も抜かして、一旦そのままここを外して、これで、エクスペクトーク。これで、いってるはず。できるならば、コンソール、表情コメント。よーし。ここまでいってるね。 じゃあ、コメンタイコール、これ関数式を使うから、実点、コメンツ点マップのマップファンクション。うん。で、JSX として、スラッシュ、インテグラル C、点、O、コメンツ、スラッシュ PR。これが出た。リターン、じゃあ、ここで、スラッシュ、ここまでいけば、よし、いいぞ。スランコション、スラッシュ、UI。コメントが出る。うん、これ新しい。あとは中身を表示させればいい。言ってるなぁ。言ってる言ってる言ってる言ってる。あと、ここか。 やっといて、ここに、例えば、スラッシュ、ディープ。こうやればいいのかな。うーん。んレンダーコメント、ディスコメント、ディステン、レンダー、ディス、ディステン、レンダー。あれまたエラーだった。なんだよ。実際のコミスメント、どこでやれてる？ is not a function. ってこと、ここエラーで出ると。これいいはずなんだよな。またエラー出た。インスペクターのプロファイルコンポーズだよな。コンソールを見るべき。ノンストコメンターのこれもダメ。もう一回、ここら辺をもうやってみますか。こうすると、これでエラー出るの？実施ディテールコンポーネント。リターンリターン。で、このリフスターンで出るの時が出ちゃうんだ。これで、ランコードが出るから、ここは、うーん。なんもなしとエラーが出るから、とりあえず div だけ入れると。 よし。うん。でいいんだ。うーん。一緒なのか。ならいいってことにしよう。メディア使えばいいってこと。あとは、ディスプレイの問題だ。表示パターンの問題だから、いや、待って。僕は、タスク3、最後。メディアを使って、メディア、フロム、リアクト、UL タグのために、ここが、 メディア、タグをフルライトして、メディア。ここもメディア入れて、メディア、リスト、メディア。あれリアクトストラップが良くない。マイナスいらない。こうすると、おう、OK。まあいいでしょう。これでタスク3までおしまいと。ということで、リストが表示できるようになったから、これをコントロール S。Git アッドして、Git コーセラのリアクト。コメント。コメント表示機能を追加と。タスク3までやった。できたなら当然それを提出しなきゃな。自分の提出。ファイルをアップロード。This。Please review ね、from 12までよかったんだ。ラってなんだラって。12の12。 カードが、でもなんだ。これでうーん。えー、ここは、ちょっと待って、今すぐ提出する前に、課題をちゃんと見た方がいい。MD は、5?12? こうか？それともコルバ SM が12か？これでやると、ずれる。うーん。コルバ、クコルバ MD バー5、コルバ S に M バー、コルバ MD バー5、M どうだ？ 1、OK。これスタイルは甘かった。これで、Git ST、Git 仕込みと、あとはこれで こまでいったからこれを提出しますと。レビュー、ワード、メニューコンポーネント。ここでメニューコンポーネントを開く。プッシュが入ってない。
これ面白い。
まあ、大変ですけど、やりがいはありますよね。食ったら、成功したら、できたっていう気分になります。リアクトコンポーネンツ。で、ファイルをアップロードで、メニューコンポーネント。スプレー。メニューカードいいや。で、ファイルをアップロードで、こっちは、ディッシュ、ディッシュディテールド。ディスプレイ、メニュー、ディスクリプションコメント。で、送信してアップデートと。自分は交際パースだから、これは、
レアクトやってたの？
そうです。今、リアクト終わったとこですよ。課題終わったとこです。出せない。
ワイもレアクトか V やらんとなぁと思いながら早4年、
4年はな、今なんかネクストとかナクストとかそこら辺がいいって話になってますね。4年やってる間に。あれ、ここって交際プラスじゃなかったっけ？
ウェブ系のお仕事してるんですか？
いいえ、うつで休んでたんですけど、少し技術力が下がってるので嫌だなぁと思って、リハビリしてます。課題成功、今やったじゃん。
もともとは
もともとは、ウェブの前ですから、クライアントサーバーの頃ですね。そういう似たようなやつやってましたね。Java とかで。コーセラプラスだからできるはずじゃなかったのか。
Java ですか？
そうです。あと、いろんな 4GL、VBA とかもちょっとやってましたね。 アライメント1、受講生によるテスト。自分の提出物。OK。アップグレード。
プバってできたら何がいいの？
今はあんまり関係ないですけど、ウェブ系みたいなことをアクセスとかそういう Windows のアプリでできたんですよ。昔は IE とかする前な頃のより前のやつだったんで、それしかなかったんですね。
アクセス聞いたことあります。
で、昔は IE とかがインターネットとか JavaScript とかほぼなかったんで、その頃はそういうアクセスとかで今みたいな Web アプリみたいなやつを使ってたんですね。
めちゃくちゃ前ですね。笑。
そうなんですよ。そうすると技術が全然やってないとキャッチアップしてないから。これきついやっていう話になっちゃうんですよね。仕方ない。コーセラプラスに入ってるはずなんだから、それでできることを待つしかないな。
英語わからなくてもこれできますか？
一応、英語が読めればかなり大丈夫ですけど、できなくても、要するにコードを見せてくれるんで、それでなんとかなります。ただちょっとお金かかるんですよね。結構。無料の部分だけ、修了証とかもらわないなら、講義のテストの結果とかは見れないですけど、そこまではできます。今もそれでお金払えって言われて困ってるところですよ。よし。じゃあ一応できたし。ディスカスフォーラムじゃないです。コースの強制の話ですよ。自分の提出。で、OK として、アップグレード。アップグレード。ありがとうございます。でもそろそろおしまいなんですけどね。仕方ない。じゃあ、これはパス。ということで、一応、リアクトの、
なんで延長しましょう。
いや、リアクト終わっちゃったんですけどね。次。じゃあ仕方ないの。あと英語の授業しか残ってないんですけど。じゃあ JavaScript の、
4グルのリプレイス案件やってましたが、プルスクルに近いですよね。
そうですね。PLSQL はやってないですけど、VBA とかああいうのはそういう感じですよね。結局、ウェブの部分が実際にパーツを集めて作るようなぐらいで、中は結局あまり変わらないっていう気がしなくはないです。
Welcome to the third module on JavaScript. In this module, we'll be doing some really exciting stuff. We'll be digging in and learning how to actually affect elements on web pages. And when we do that, we'll also be looking at events. We'll look at what happens when you want to capture a click or a scroll or the submission of a form.
今月から VHS の案件やってます。
どうです Vue.js って。なんとなく PHP みたいな感じがしたんですけど、ちょっとこれやってみて。
フロントエンド全然やってなかったので、面食らってます。
そういうのありますね。バックエンドとフロントエンドってかなり違うので。で、組み込みは僕やったことないんでわかんないんですけど、かなり違うらしいですね。
So tightly connected into the browser, and we'll really get into that in this part of this course during this module. So I hope you have fun with it, and by the end you will have learned quite a lot of JavaScript.
JS といえば。
リアクトと V どっちがいいんですかね？
今リアクトやったんですけど、リアクトの方が覚えることが多いというか、それ自身が VBA みたいに JS とよりも自分自身で勝手にやる感じですよね。Vue の方が JavaScript をする感じなので覚えやすいと思います。タイプスクリプトの場合はどっちがいいのかはわかんないですね。ただ全部フロントエンドフレームワークのライブラリでエラーが分かりにくいっていうのがあるんで、そこをどうするかですね。
I'm showing an article with a header and a paragraph and a footer, and that matches the HTML that's in the image here on the left. So if you look at the markup on the left, you can see how that matches the article here and in the diagram. And JavaScript sees the article as an object that has children. One child would be the header, and the header itself has a child, which would be the H1. And then another child of the article is a paragraph, and another child of the article is the footer, which also has a child, which is a paragraph. And we can see that represented in the diagram over here. These elements on the page are nodes, and JavaScript understands the relationships between nodes, and we can use methods and properties to do what's called traversing the document and getting from one node to another so that we could affect it with JavaScript. So for example, if node A was that article and it has 3 children, you could say node A dot first child is node dash A1, and node A last child is node A3. And you can look through the descriptions on the left here and understand the relationships between these different elements. So node A1 dot parent
V のガイド見てたら結構わかりやすそう。
HTML タグに Vue のそういうタグを埋め込む感じですよね。なので、楽は楽です。ちょうどこのコーセラにも Vue のそういう簡単なやつを作る課題があったんでやってみたんですけど、楽そうな感じですかね。
This is a little weird. This is kind of strange. But really, when you think about it, JavaScript's tight integration in with the browser and with what happens on our document is really JavaScript's reason for being. And certainly we're seeing JavaScript now outside the browser and in other places, but JavaScript's main reason for being is the fact that it can do this stuff and other scripting languages can't, or other programming languages can't. And in 2009, when they decided that JavaScript was going to be the programming language for the web, it was going to be native to the browser, that's when this stuff really got solidified and everybody wanted to follow the exact same specification. And even if they were doing slightly different implementations of it, they were following the specification so this would work with JavaScript in whichever browser you were in. And it's taken a while to get to compatibility across browsers with JavaScript, but we're pretty close to there these days.
JavaScript と一緒になってもいろんな API の方が。
夕食行ってきます。またお邪魔します。
はい、ありがとうございました。
The dot syntax and methods. Notice we use dots or periods to separate objects from their properties or their methods in JavaScript. And on the right here, you can see that we have a number of methods that are related to being able to traverse the DOM or affect the DOM. Insert before, we can create an element and insert it before another element. We can replace a child. We could say, take this child out of here, remove a child, append a child. We can add a new paragraph to the end of a div or something like that. Clone a node. We could take an entire div with all its contents and clone it and add it to the page somewhere else. We can create an element. We can create attributes. We can create a text node. These are all methods that JavaScript has built into it that will allow us to do things to the document object model, to the document itself, and will affect the document there. One of the document methods you'll use most frequently, and is a good one to learn first, is getElementById. GetElementById is a document method or a function that belongs to the document object. Remember that's and what we can use with getElementById is we can pass in a particular ID into our DOM, our document object.
まあ、後が大変だったりしますけどね。
and do something with it. So we could set the
とりあえず楽にできるのはそれでいいんじゃないですか。今のワードプレスはわかんないんですけど、基本的にワードプレスはモジュールとかクラスとかになってなかったんで、後が大変だなって感じでしたんですけど、拡張性とか将来の作り直しとかが大変だかなっていう感じがするんですよね。
driver's license ID or some other ID with a unique ID number on it. The whole purpose of having an ID is that it is unique.
だからって一から作るのはめんどくさいので、今の JavaScript はそういう感じでパッケージが出てるといいんですけどね。ブログとかの。
普通の小さな会社のサイトならちょっと更新できたらいいって人ばっかですよね。
ですよね。というよりテキスト書くのが文章書くの大変だからそこもやってくれっていうのが多くありません？
So the get is lowercase, but E is uppercase, B is uppercase, and I is uppercase, but the D is lowercase. So you have to get that right, otherwise it won't work.
まあでも文章が書いてくれるならあとはもう本当にワードプレスでちょっと書くくらい十分ですよねっていうふうに。
機能つけても大体みんな更新してないです。
大変なんですよね。いや、技術者だってそうやってなかなか技術ブログとか書かないじゃないですか。結構書くのって大変なので、やっぱり本当にそういう好きな人じゃないとやらないってところがありますね。ああ。書いたからスタイルカラーのところに追加されたよっていう話。
When the page loaded, JavaScript loaded the paragraph the way I wrote it, and then what the script did is it went in and found that element with the ID of 1, and it added the style attribute here.
これめちゃくちゃ初歩の話してますね。
JavaScript のベーシックっていう基本の講義なんで、めちゃくちゃ初歩のところやってます。英語の勉強に逆にいいんですよ、こういうのって。もう分かりきってることを英語で説明してくれてるんで、ああ、英語でそう書くんだ、話すんだっていうところは分かりますよね。
英語はもう諦めました。
ああ。やった方がいいかなと思うんですけども、大変ですよね。結局、数をこなす必要あるんで。
Here's another document method that allows us to get elements on the page and do something with them. It's called getElement.
これは早いんで、もっと早く。 1.5 ぐらいにしてもうちょっ
なん
と下が
となく
ってもらう。
雰囲気わかればいいやになりました。
それで十分じゃないですか。特に技術英語っていうのはそんなに難しいの使わないし、なんとなくわかるって大体大丈夫です。本気で最後までやってるときは、DeepL とかでもありますし。
Here I have my page, I have some paragraphs on the page, and I can write a script here.
ここはタグネームの方なので。
Get elements by tag name. And again, the best thing to do is to go down and make sure you select it from the list. That way you won't spell it wrong. But it's get elements with a capital E and an S by tag name. Make sure you get all the capitalization right there. And then I can actually pass in, say, a P for paragraphs. So what this is going to do is it's going to go in and get all of these elements. And I can assign that to a variable. Var my paragraphs equals.
この場合、アレになるんだ。
A collection of paragraphs. And if I console log that out, console.log my paragraphs. If I console log that out, let's see what I get. I'm going to come back over here to my page and refresh. And we don't see any difference here, but if I go to the console, you'll see I get an HTML collection of three things: paragraph, paragraph, and paragraph. And that's what's in here. And I can even fold this down and see what the different paragraphs are.
それでそういうオブジェクトになるから。
But it's giving you the collection of the paragraphs here. So that's kind of important to understand about this particular method. Whereas get element by ID gives me always just one thing. It'll always give me one because IDs are unique. Whereas get elements by tag name will give me an HTML collection of elements that I need to then do something else with. If I wanted to set the color of these paragraphs to
あら、ともう使いやすいんですよ。
仕事でもしよっかなって感じですか？
そうですね。ウェブ系なら仕事多そうですし、できたらやってみたいかなっていう感じでありますよね。
And let's go ahead and do this over here. Rather than console log this out. I'm going to use a shorter
まあ、特にそれに今までやってなかったっていうところがあるんで、JavaScript とかは徹底的に基本とかから打席に覚え直そうっていうところがあります。
That's fine. All right, great. So I'm going to make a for loop. And again, remember, if you've been doing the challenges and really getting used to the syntax, you should be able to just write a for loop. For var I equals, not one, I equals 0, while I is less than P's dot length I plus plus. And then we've got our curly braces. And in here, I'm going to take each paragraph. So I'm going to say P's square bracket I dot style dot color equals red. Now, if I just do this, you'll see it'll work. It'll actually go through this entire loop. The first time through the loop, this thing has 3 paragraphs in it. It's going to get paragraph 0 and set its style color to red. And then I gets incremented from 0 to 1. 1 is less than 3, so it will get paragraph 1, which is this one here, and set its color to red. I gets incremented again to 2. 2 is less than 3, so it'll come in and it'll get paragraph 2, that's this one here, and set its color to red. And then I gets incremented to 3. 3 is no longer less than 3. Because remember, ps.length, the length of this is 3. So 3 is no longer less than 3 and the script will end. So let's give that a try. Let's run that over here. If I refresh this, you can see all my paragraphs. Now, loop goes so fast, you can't even see it. So let's do something to make it so we can really see that this is actually loop. So I think this is kind of interesting. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add alert. I'm going to use my my backticks here. Showing paragraph I, and then don't forget, since that's going to be a variable, we're going to $sign, curly brace. Curly brace. Now, if I run this in Chrome, I'm going to get this alert 3 times. Showing paragraph 0, showing paragraph 1, showing paragraph 2, and then it turns the colors. Even better is to show this in Firefox. So I'm going to switch to Firefox web browser over here. Firefox does things a little bit differently. Mozilla rendering engine, and so it renders things a little bit differently. So I'm going to go ahead and open our page here in Firefox. And there's my DOM HTML. And notice the difference here. This one actually shows the first paragraph. And then we see the second paragraph turn red, and I get the alert. And then I get the third paragraph turning red. So you can actually see the loop actually running. And usually these loops run so fast you don't even see them. But with the alert in there, you can actually see that that loop is running and turning the paragraphs red one at a time in the collection. And I think that that's helpful in understanding how JavaScript works with collections of elements.
The class name. まあでもこれわざわざ覚えるよりも今はビューとかそれ使っちゃうから関係ないって感じがするよな。やるの jQuery でもいい。
elements that have a particular class name and put them into an HTML collection. So that's very useful as well. Let's give it a try real quick. Here you can see I've added class equals special. And on my image over there it was blue, but whatever class you want to put is fine. It doesn't really matter as long as you set up a variable var my class equals document dot get elements by class name, this one here. And again, make sure you get all the capitalization right or it won't work. And we're going to get special. Make sure you spell it the same as it is there. I'm likely to spell that wrong. So that will take all of these elements, in this case it's just 2, and stick them into a
アメリカのウェブ制作者が作ったイケイケのサイトみたいな。
use our loop to go through and change these.
いや、そういうのを見せてるわけじゃないんで、こういうしょうもないのを見せてください。
I could just put a 2 there, but it's better to use this just to make sure that I get all of them, no matter how many there are. I++. And then I could do my class, square bracket I. First time through the loop, that's going to be a 0. Second time through the loop, it's going to be a 1, and then it'll finish.
さらっと出しましょう。この場合は真ん中は変わらないってことですね。
And it turned those 2 classes red. Now, one more point of interest while we're here. Even if I just had one element on the page that had this class, I could give it an ID and use getElement by ID. But if I am going to use getElements by class name, even if there's only one, it still is going to return a collection of elements. And that collection is only going to have one element in it. And I still need to use a loop or some other way of getting to the element inside the collection, even though there's only one. And you'll see the loop will still work. It'll just run only one time. A little bit easier way of doing that is I don't really need a loop here because I know that it's only there's only one element in this collection. So I know it's going to be elements.
まあ、スペシャルに行けばそんなにならないよという話ね。
Like so. Kind of clean that up a little bit. So now I've got my class is getting elements by class name special, and my class 0. Since I know there's only one, it's going to be my class 0. It's going to be that one in the collection. So I can access it through, because it's treated like an array there. It's not actually an array. It's a collection of HTML elements, but I can treat it like an array to go and get element 0 out of there. And you'll see that will work just as well. But the important thing here to understand is that if you're using get elements by class name or get elements by tag name or anything else that gives you a collection of elements, you have to go in and treat it as if it's a collection, because that's what it is, and not just as an individual element. And that's easy to forget, especially if you have only one. You're like, I can't just change that one. Why can't I just use my class style code red? Because there's only one element with that class in there. But JavaScript is getting a collection of elements, even if the collection only has one element, or even if it has 0 elements in it, it'll still be a collection of elements. So that's an important thing to understand about get elements by class name and get elements by tag name.
まずアクロニムさんのドキュメントオブジェクトモデルと。Just document some get them by ID will return how many years? Wow. はいはい、0のだ。あとは0。クエリーセレクター。どうしようかな。
method that we're going to look at is query selector. Now, the history here is a little bit interesting because in 2009, as we said before, ES5 became the de facto standard for scripting for the web. But there was the rise of a library called jQuery that became extremely popular, and it remains very popular to this day. Less so now than it was, but it's still a very popular library that made getting elements in the DOM and doing things with them a lot easier. And jQuery was very popular for that reason. And due to that popularity, JavaScript had added to it in 2013 before ES6 an API that allows us to use query selector and query selector all, which we'll also look at, to get elements from the DOM. And it's a little bit more convenient, but it works a little bit differently than the older get element by ID, get element by tag name, get element by class name methods. So these are newer methods, and they're very useful, but they work a little bit differently. And because of the introduction of these methods, jQuery is not nearly as necessary as it used to be. And we'll still learn jQuery. We'll be learning that in the second course in specialization. But now we can actually get elements into our DOM a little bit easier than we could just with the older methods. Okay, so let's take a look at query selector and the way that works. So over here I have a document. I have a div with an ID.
クエリセレクト使えば jQuery いらないよねって話では。確かに。
my var my text equals document document.query selector. Document.query selector. And then what I would pass in is actually instead of just some class, I would put either I could put some class. You use so what's different here is before we didn't use the CSS syntax. Now we have to use the CSS syntax with query selector. Or I could even be more specific and I could say go find #special dot some class to get to some class inside the ID special. And what's nice about this is that query selector will always return the first element that it finds that matches what you pass in here. So even if I had another paragraph with some class on it, this will always only return one thing to my text. Let's put a semicolon there and see if this works. My text dot color style dot color equals red. And if I go over and test this document, again, I recommend that you give this a try yourself. You can see that it's turned that paragraph red. Now, if I were to go in here and add my class, some class to another element on here, like this one here, you'll see it will still only affect the first paragraph if I go back and refresh this, because it only gets the first element that it matches. And that's very useful for when you want to go and get something like that. And again, remember with both query selector and query selector all that you have to pass in, when you pass stuff in, you're passing in the CSS syntax, #special instead of just special, or .some class instead of just some class. That's really important with query selector. Okay, great. Let's take a look at the query selector all method in the next video.
で、クリスト最初だけだから、全部の時は all を使いと。
The query selector all method does what you would think it would do, is that it allows you to grab a group of elements again, but this time using the newer, more updated DOM API query selector all. So let's go and give that a try really quickly here. So over here, I've got my div ID special and I've got some paragraphs in here, and I can do something like var my text equals document dot query selector all. I want that one, query selector all. And I could pass in here in quotes, I could pass in #special P. And that's going to get me all of the paragraphs that are inside this special. So I'm going to document, find a particular group of elements somewhere in my document. But again, with this, we're going to need a for loop for var I equals 0.
バーを使っちゃいけない。まだフリーって感じよな。
Dot length I plus plus. And then I can do my text square bracket I dot style dot color equals red. There we go. Save that, and then we should be able to test it over here and see when I refresh the page, it is turning all those paragraphs red. And just one more time to just drive this home, notice in here when I go look in that div, it's added style color red to each one of these paragraphs. That's what it's doing. It's going into special and finding the paragraphs and affecting the DOM after the page, after the HTML initially loaded. It's really important to understand that. That's the way this works. So query selector all will allow us to get groups of elements, and then we would loop through them to affect them one at a time. So far, we've talked about 5 document methods. 3 of them are older. Document get element by ID. We'll still use that quite a lot. Document get elements by tag name, and document get elements by class name. You might use this less often now because now we have the newer methods, query selector and query selector all. But these are just some of the document elements that allow us to add elements to the page. Next, I want to talk about working with properties. And we've already seen this a little bit. We've seen element.style.color. So we're going in and we're getting that element, whatever the element is, we've got that element, whether it's paragraphs or whether it's a div or whatever it is, we're getting that element with our document methods. We're getting those elements, and then we can apply the style property, get the style property, color subproperty, and set it to whatever color name we want. And there are other properties that we can use. There are a number of them. Some of the more popular ones or ones that we'll use more frequently are inner HTML. We'll be seeing that one quite a bit. And class name is really useful so that you can actually take an element and apply a class to it. This is super useful in modern JavaScript because CSS has become so powerful. Now we can put animations in CSS, and then when we want to animate something, we can use JavaScript to add that class in CSS that has the animation, and the animation will take place on the screen. And that's a really, really great way to create interactive or animated elements on a web page. So we have the document methods, and now we have element properties that allow us to work with the properties of certain elements, but there are also element methods or element functions. And those are also really useful. So for example, set attribute, we could pass in an attribute name and then set its value. So not only can we, back here we could set the class name by using the class name property. Here we could set the class name by passing in class and then passing in a value. I forgot to quote at the end there. But we could pass in the value there. Or we could do something else. We could use on an anchor tag, we could set the href attribute and set its value. Or we could remove an attribute, or we could get an attribute and do things with it. Notice that methods are distinguished by the fact that they have parentheses. So when you're using a method or a function, it has parentheses, whereas the properties don't have parentheses. They have an equal sign and then the value. So that's how you can tell the difference between a property and a method. Okay, great. Let's see what else we can do with this. This may be a little bit confusing at the moment, but I promise that as we practice this stuff, it'll start to make more sense. But it does take a little bit of getting used to all these methods and properties for working with our document to affect our web pages.
まずインナー HTML からか。
Next, we'll take a look at one of the element properties that we just talked about in the previous video and see how powerful it is. And that's inner HTML. And if you look at this image here, you can see I have a div with an ID special, and I can use any of my document methods to go in and get that div. And then I could use inner HTML to actually change the contents in that div. I can replace these contents with something else entirely, completely new, completely different, and that something else could have HTML in it. So let's see what that looks like. So over here, I have my div ID special, and I have these 3 paragraphs in here. But down here, I could say var my div equals document.getElementById. Pick it from the list so you don't spell it wrong. Special. With this version, we're not using the pound.
Ah, ecco,
get element by ID.
Devo vedere.
Switch that in a minute just to see what that looks like. But then I can say, okay, I've got that element, my div dot inner HTML equals, this is an element property, so we use the equal sign, and then inside quotes, I can create a completely new piece of content.
ああ、なるほど。そういう風にできるんだ。ああ、なるほど。
Okay, great. So now when I run this, you'll see over here.
最近って変数はレッドじゃないですっけ？
そうですね。レッドがコースですね。このコースはだいたい2015年とかちょっと古いやつのコースなんで、ES6 に対応してないことが多いんですよ。そこで適宜読み替えるとか、そうやってくれることですね。
Now here I'm using getElementById special. I could also do query selector.
2015年か。
ちょっと古いんですよ。
This is the newer method, and it uses the CSS syntax to get to that element. But this will work just the same. If I go back and refresh this page, you'll see it'll do exactly the same thing. It'll get my new paragraph and put it in there. So you could use whichever document method you want. Once you get that element, then you can use your element properties to affect the element here. Now I'm putting this all inside of this div here, but I don't need to use the variable. I could just do document getElementById special and then put this here. It just makes for a very long line. So it's kind of helpful, and that'll work.
まあ、それでもできるよねっていう。
The variable, but you don't have to have it. I could just go document query selector special.innerHTML and then set my property right there, and that'll work just as well. There's my paragraph. So that's using the inner HTML. And again, I just cannot overemphasize how powerful inner HTML is. We could use this in lots and lots of places to get elements on our page and then replace those elements with completely new elements. And you can put more HTML in there. We could put an entire document of HTML inside this div. Not just one paragraph, but you could put articles, you could put images, all kinds of things could go in there using inner HTML.
ですね。
The next element property that I want to show you, which is extremely useful, is the class name element property. So let's take a look at how this one works. Here I have a div with some paragraphs in here, and I'm using my query selector to get the first paragraph. Because remember, instead of returning a collection, query selector returns the first one that it finds. So it's going to go in here and look for the first paragraph. And then
クラスで変えるのが、まあ、今は主流だよ
to set the
ね。
class to blue. And up here I've added style and I've added a class blue here to my document. So let's see how this works. I'm going to go over to my page over here, and you can see I've added up here a rule here to set for anything that has the class blue here. So let's come down here and I'm going to call this var first para equals document dot query selector. And remember, we have to use the CSS syntax. In this case, it's just a P because it's just a tag selector. But I'm going to go get that first paragraph. Now I've got 3 paragraphs, but remember, query selector just returns the first one. And then I'm going to say, okay, first para, set the class name. And you can see here, there's one called class list. I'm just showing you a few of the document the document properties that are super useful, but there are plenty of other ones that you can look up and work with as well. Class name equals blue. So now when I run this, come back here, click on my document here. I've got my 3 paragraphs. It turns the first paragraph blue. And if I come down here and look at this, what is it actually done there? But it's added class blue onto that paragraph. Sure, I could have set the style color property to blue, but adding the class blue is even more powerful because even though in both cases I'm just setting the color, I could have a lot more declarations in this class up here that would do all kinds of things. I could be adding an animation. I could be doing all kinds of really cool stuff. And we'll get to do some of those things in this course. So hold on to your hat because it's coming. But first, I just want to introduce the basic concepts to begin with. And this is a super useful one. Using the class name property to set a class that already exists on the page is just really, really powerful. Back to our slides here. We've looked at a few of the element properties that we can set. The style property with its subproperties for our different CSS features. We can use that one. We can use the inner HTML property. That's extremely powerful for replacing HTML inside of any element. And then there is the class name property that allows us to put a class name on things. The next thing I want to look at really quickly is some of the element methods. Remember, these are properties because they've got the equal sign and then a value, but we also have element methods. And the first one we'll look at is set attribute. So here I have a form, and let's just do this one really quickly here. I have a form, and I'm going to say var my checkbox equals document dot get element, or I can do query selector input, and then I'll get my first input field here. And then I could do, okay, my checkbox dot set attribute, and set attribute takes 2 parameters. I'm going to say, what is the attribute that I want to set? In this case, it's checked, and I'm going to set the value also checked.
そういうふうにできるんだ。
checked, checked.
チェックチェック
That's the way.
を
What that
し
will do is
て、
it'll come in here and it's going to set a checked
実行
attribute
すると
and set
オ
it
ン
to
にな
checked,
るわけね。
which will make the checkbox checked by default. So if we go over and view the page, currently without having set that checkbox, you can see I've got a checkbox here, but it's not checked. When I refresh the page, it comes up as checked by default. And if I come down here and look at this, you can see checked equals checked. It's added that attribute into my HTML here. So set attribute could be used for any number of attributes. You want to set an image source on an element, you could use this. You want to change the href on a link, you could use this. Any attribute could be accessed with set attribute, and you could set it to whatever value you want to set it to. And that is another very powerful tool that allows us to change content on our web pages.
Suppose you want to separate the dynamic content attribute. Use the properties equal to use this. The innerこうかな。じゃあこれも使えってこと？まあ、イメージも全部突っ込めばいいってことか。
I've shown you a few of the document methods, the element methods, and the element properties in this lesson. And there are lots more. There are many, many more that you can use to do all kinds of interesting things to your pages. But I think it's helpful to see just a few to begin with, to see how those work and to experiment with those in a limited way, and then add more features and methods and all of that stuff as you go along. I do want to show you just a few more in this lesson, just because I think it's helpful to just see that there are different ways of doing things in JavaScript. And this one I want to show you is a way of creating elements and text nodes in JavaScript and then adding them to the page. It's kind of an interesting process. And again, we've used inner HTML, and we can use that to also change content on the page. But this is just a different way of doing it. So here, let's actually switch over to the code editor so we can actually do this. Here, I'm going to make a variable var my tag, and I'm going to say document dot create element, create an element. And what am I going to create? I'm going to create a paragraph. So this makes a new paragraph and puts it into my tag. Create element is a document property that makes a new element. And then I'm going to make a new text node, var my text equals document dot create text node. Here's a new paragraph. So I'm going to make the text node. So JavaScript creates a text node. We create the paragraph. We create the text node. And then we're going to say my tag dot append child my text. So that takes the paragraph that we just created, the text node, this text, and sticks it into the paragraph tag that we created. So all of this is just happening in memory in JavaScript. And then we have to actually put it on the page. So I'm going to get my div here, var my div equals document dot query selector div. That's going to go find the first div on the page. And then I can say my div dot append child my tag. So we're doing a multi-step process here, where we're taking the paragraph, we're creating a paragraph, we're creating some text, putting the text in the paragraph, and then going and getting our div and putting the paragraph, appending it to the end of the paragraph there. Let's see if I did this right. If I come back and do this over here and refresh, you can see that my first paragraph is here and a new paragraph has been appended inside the div. It's been added to the div here. And JavaScript is doing that through this process. Could I have just used inner HTML and added and changed the contents of this div so that it had these two paragraphs? Sure, I could have done it that way. But sometimes it's useful. This seems like a kind of convoluted, complicated way, but sometimes it's useful to actually create the elements using the document method create element to create content to stick in those elements and then to append them to the page in particular places. Sometimes it's useful, and sometimes a better way to go than using inner HTML in certain circumstances. One last method that I want to show you in this lesson is how to remove an element from another element. And again, we could use inner HTML.
まあ、追加だけだからね、
sometimes
つくこともあるよねっていう。
So let's take a look at this example really quickly. Here I have a div with two paragraphs in it, and I'm going to go ahead and var my div and assign it document dot query selector div. That'll go get the first div on the page, which there's only one, so that's nice and easy. And then I could do my div dot remove child. That method. And which child am I going to remove? Well, I'm going to say my div dot children square bracket 1. So what that's going to do is it's going to go into my div, look at its children, and find child number 1. Remember, this is child number 0 here. That's 0. This is 1. So that will actually go and remove this second paragraph from this div. Put a semicolon there. Save that, and then let's go over to our browser here. And you can see I've got the 2 paragraphs there. When I refresh the page, that second one is gone. And down here, it's not in here anymore. It's been taken out. JavaScript removed it. So removing elements using the remove child method is a really useful tool for removing elements from the page if you need to do that. And so here we've seen a lot of different methods that we can use on our web pages to do all kinds of things. And we've talked about some of the document methods, some of the element methods, and some of the element properties that we can use to go in and affect content on our page. And remember, JavaScript sees the page as this tree of objects, starting with the window and building down from there. And we can traverse that document and find elements on there and then affect them using these different methods and properties. And that's how we're going to create all kinds of interactive elements on our web pages.
Additional resource. 僕、今の練習できますよという。まあいいかな。さすがに今日は疲れたので、今日はここまでにします。見てる人ありがとうございました。リアクトの課題が提出できなかったのは心残りですが、仕方ないでしょう。では、ありがとうございました。ではでは。
ディスコンネクト。